Have you ever heard of the story Where the Wild Things Are? It's a book about a boy named Max who one day puts on a wolf costume and then proceeds to go around his home and act a fool. He's banging on the walls with hammers, terrorizing the cat, basically making his presence known. Due to his behavior, his mother would call him a wild thing, and in return, Max would yell at her. So his mother decides to send him to his room without dinner. Once inside of this room, Max grew angry, and then suddenly, trees began to grow, and so did vines, and before you know it, the entire room was covered. And then suddenly, a boat appears, and Max decides to sail. He sails for a period of time before ending up at a piece of land, but on this land were monsters, and as soon as Max arrived, they began roaring. Instead of being frightened, Max would tell the monsters, "Be still," and the monsters listened. They then decided to dub Max the king of all wild things. Max then declared it's time to act wild. So, just like at his home, Max is now in this forest, and him and the monsters are causing a commotion together. They would go throughout the night into the morning sunrise, and then Max would order everyone to stop. He then orders the monsters to go to bed without dinner. Then suddenly, Max begins to smell something. So he gets back on his boat and he sails back home. And by the time he reaches his room, his dinner is there and it's still hot. A lot of people may ask, what does this have to do with true crime? Well, if you stick around, you'll see where I'm going with this.
July 18th, 1997. The world would make way for Montieria Myers. She would be born to her mother, Montieria Myers, and her father, Monte Neal. Now, it isn't clear exactly what transpired, but things wouldn't work out between the parents, and Montieria would be raised by her grandparents, Linda Myers and Howard Brooks. Montieria is described as someone who's full of energy, someone very mannerable, respectful. She also had a winning personality and a smile that could light up a room. The place that Montieria would be born and raised would be Hot Springs, Arkansas. On a yearly average, thousands visit Hot Springs, Arkansas for its attractions. But there's a group of people outside of that who call this place home now. For the most part, it's okay. It has its edgy sides, but it's a family dwelling. If you happen to search the place on the internet, it'll tell you about its beauty and its safety. But if you ask the chief of police, well, he'll tell a different story. In fact, he says the city is crime-riddled. But beyond those statistics are ordinary people. People like Montieria. She would attend the public school system in Hot Springs, Arkansas, where she would be a cheerleader. She was also someone who never missed a day of school. Upon the many perfect attendance awards, she would also receive a lot of love. Due to her personality, she had a lot of friends. She was considered to be jazzy, someone with a spunk attitude, a person who enjoyed dressing nice and looking their best. Like everyone who travels this thing we called life, we go through our younger years, and then those rebellious teenage years, before we finally hit that graduation mark, and we set out into the world as adults. Graduation day for Montieria was outstanding. She was ready to take on the world, and one person in particular who would be there to cheer her across the stage would be her sister. 2 years after Montieria entered this world, her sister Mernaiya would be born on December 8th of 1999. Both Montieria and Mernaiya shared the same mother, Montieria Myers. However, Mernaiya's father was Bob Travis. Mernaiya also called Hot Springs, Arkansas, home. She would also attend the public school system before ultimately graduating in the year of 2018. Mernaiya was a firecracker, but not in a bad way. Someone with a spontaneous personality. Like her sister, she was also energetic. She was also confident, someone who didn't mind taking pictures. A photograph can tell a lot. It can tell a lot about you as a person. A photograph can show your subtle pose or your gentle eyes. Photographs have the power to capture the essence of the moment. With one snap, you can capture the mood. The way you look inside of a photo tells a lot about that moment. And through a gentle smile, you can know that on that day, things were okay. Although Montieria was raised by her grandparents, while Mernaiya was raised by her mother, they were close. After all, sisterhood is a bond that can't be broken unless you want it to. After high school, Montieria would attend college, where she would receive her cosmetology degree. As for Mernaiya, she would attend the University of Arkansas in Pine Bluff, where she would major in psychology. Mernaiya picked this background hoping to work with at-risk children and their families. Mernaiya was a selfless person, someone who always thought about the next before herself. But the big heart did not get in the way of life. She was someone who enjoyed life and lived life to the fullest. By the year of 2019, Montieria would be 22, while her sister would be 19. At this point, they're just young and innocent. For Montieria and Mernaiya, they had their lives planned out. They had futures that they were attempting to achieve. But little did anyone know that 2019 would be the year of change. And when 2019 said farewell and greeted the beginning of 2020, Montieria and Mernaiya would no longer be here. July 24th, 2019. At approximately 2:41 p.m., the Hot Springs, Arkansas police would be dispatched to Simply Unique Hair Beauty Supply. At this time, the officers are responding to an altercation that ended up in gunfire. By the time the officers arrived on the scene, they would find one victim deceased, while the other was in critical condition. At this point, they only know that two females are injured. One is rushed to the hospital, while the detectives begin to tape off the scene for a crime scene investigation. Like normal, they begin interviewing the onlookers, anyone who may have seen what transpired. The officers would quickly learn that three females entered the beauty supply store. They then had an altercation with another female. This altercation wasn't just verbal, it turned physical. During the altercation, someone pulled out a firearm and began releasing. During this instant, two females would be struck, one transferred to the hospital, while the other laid on the scene. For now, the officers are working a homicide investigation, but it was about to get even deeper. Like any other investigation, the authorities were preparing to go to the hospital to see the other victim. In a case like this, best case scenario, the victim survives and they receive testimony and know exactly who the culprit is. But sadly, this would turn out the other way. They would come to find that the second victim would be pronounced deceased shortly after arriving at the hospital. In most cases, they analyze the scene, then they go looking for a suspect. But in this case, they wouldn't have to look far. Unlike most cases, the perpetrator who fired the weapon was still on the scene. That person was handcuffed and taken downtown for interrogation. Meanwhile, word is spreading about the tragedy. In the beginning, the girls were unknown, but they have now been positively identified. The victims were none other than 22-year-old Montieria Myers and 19-year-old Mernaiya Myers. In that moment, the family was preparing a funeral, while the local PD was investigating. That investigation wouldn't last long. The officers declared the culprit's actions justifiable. They saw this as no more than a case of self-defense. But there was still one more question to answer. When the authorities interviewed the people on the scene, they said that 3 people showed up, 1 person fired, but 1 got in the car and drove away. Like any other altercation, they knew each other, and it wouldn't take long to identify the third person as the mother of Montieria and Mernaiya. It's alleged that on that day, LaTanya Myers took her daughters to this beauty supply store. Their reason for going to this store is to get into this altercation with this other female. Witnesses on the scene would testify that it turned physical, and afterwards, the victim began firing. In this moment, Mernaiya would be hit. She would immediately collapse on the scene and shortly afterwards make her transition. In that same instant, her sister was also inside of the line of fire. Montieria would also be harmed and also succumb to the same injury. Witnesses on the scene say that when the two girls were hit, the mother then hopped in a black car and drove away. They even go as far as to say she never tried to help them. They say she ran for her life and never looked back. As far as a motive, the authorities never released one. They simply released a statement saying that the situation was justified and no charges would be filed. They would, however, be actively seeking charges against their mother, the person who brought the two girls to the scene. But the elephant in the room at this moment is why? What exactly is the motive? Although the authorities never released the motive, the streets talk, and the story behind the tragedy of Montieria and Mernaiya was released. People allege that this all started over a guy who 19-year-old Mernaiya was dating. But he wasn't only dating Mernaiya, he was also dating the girl whom they went to confront. It is alleged that on the day that Montieria and Mernaiya and their mother went to this beauty supply store to confront this woman, it was retaliation. It's said that the night before they showed up to that beauty supply store, that female had come to the home of Mernaiya. It's said that after she showed up, she basically jumped on Mernaiya with a few girls and even hit her with a weapon. Shortly afterward, the mother finds out. They say she then took her girls to her place of employment to get revenge. They allege the three women then had their way with her and walked off. They then say that the victim fired the shots after they were headed to the car. It's alleged that at that moment, Montieria and Mernaiya were hit in the back head region. The mother has now gotten in the car and drove off, where the two girls would ultimately be pronounced deceased. If that statement is true, then self-defense went out the window as soon as the culprit fired as they were walking away. But as I said, the authorities never released any more information, not an autopsy, nor did they release a follow-up. So, for that reason alone, I won't be releasing the name of the person who actually carried out the action. Was this truly a case of self-defense? Or was it no more than a case that the authorities wanted to open and shut fast? I guess we'll never know.
Police not saying much about this investigation. They were called to this beauty supply store where two people were shot and killed. As you mentioned, right now they're not releasing what happened or the victims' names. I did speak to several people in this area who says this entire street was blocked off, and they say the violence needs to stop.
When you're not here, life is insufferable. Don't be a stranger, even though we said bars.
A business's doors closed for now after 3 people went inside the store Wednesday, but only 1 came out. Hot Springs police confirmed 19-year-old Mernaiya Myers and her sister, 22-year-old Montieria Myers, and their mother went into Simply Unique Hair Beauty Supply to confront one of the workers. They got in a fight with that employee. Witnesses say the worker was badly beaten, grabbed a gun, and shot at the women. Their mother got in a black car and drove off.
In the beginning of this story, I mentioned the book Where the Wild Things Are. I explained how Max put on the wolf suit and began to act up before ultimately being sent to bed with no dinner. This would anger Max. In fact, he was so angry that he would escape into his own world. Subtle clues in the book will let you know that the monsters were actually Max, and that he had escaped into a world of his own demons. It's truly a tale about a boy who in his moment of anger would submit to his evil side. But just like the book, in real life, people submit to their demons every day. And in some cases, they may run across someone whose intentions are more evil than theirs. They're truly where the wild things are, lost inside themselves.
All of my tears fill up a swimming pool. I'm
it's just sad. I mean, usually crimes in the area are just, drug or alcohol related, but I mean, that's sad.
When we could enjoy each other's company, our heart all in pieces.
The believed shooter was taken in for questioning but not arrested. Now those in the area say they worry about retaliation and are keeping quiet. They say the beauty shop worker and the owner have left the city for safety. The whole incident leaving to question who was the real victim.
What happened to Montieria and Mernaiya is completely tragic. But to add insult to injury, they were driven to their demise by their mother. And on that sad day of July 24th of 2019, it would be the end. And now all their loved ones have to hold is memories. Rest in peace, Montieria and Mernaiya Myers. Thank you for being a light for others.